One of the first stories of I ever coming to LA, I saw a very famous comic who I loved, and I yelled his name out like that, and he went, "Fuck you." And I was like, holy shit. Now, I've had an encounter with him since. Boogie Nights just premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. He saw the movie and wanted to come and meet me. He said, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I'm a big fan. I saw the movie." I said, "Oh, we've met before. Briefly, but we met." Basketball Diaries was the second film that I had acted in. It was directed by the late, great Scott Calvert, who had directed all my music videos and was really encouraging me to become an actor, something I wasn't interested at the time. But thankfully, with his persuasion and also Penny Marshall, I ended up finding movies and acting and never wanting to do anything else. I played a very angry and violent heroin addict slash high school basketball player. That was probably the movie that I worked the hardest to get the part. I had auditioned probably about 7 times. My auditions became something of a thing for people to actually come in and watch live. And then finally, once me and Leo were able to get in the room together, everybody agreed that I was the right guy for the part. Probably the most memorable for me was the scene when the guy rips us off and we chase him down and then finally catch him on the roof. I was running and jumping over different stuff and jump over this giant row of trash bags, and in one take my foot caught the edge of it and went to put my arms up to stop my fall and separated my shoulder. Still finished the rest of the scene, and then I was in a New Jersey hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning. Fear was also a movie that I was not supposed to be in or get the part. I had Renaissance Man and Basketball Diaries in the can, but neither one of them had come out yet. And Leo had actually mentioned to James Foley that he should look at me for this part. James Foley didn't know who I was, and then when Leo said Marky Mark, and then Jamie thought it was a joke and kind of laughed. He said, "No, you should really meet him. I think he'd be great in this part." I just worked with him. So I had a meeting with Jamie. We had an 8-hour meeting, had lunch, went to a bar, and then by the time I got to my house, my phone was ringing, and it was him, and he was like, "Dude, I just want to let you know. I mean, there's no way you can have this part, but I really had a good time with you. I hope we could still be friends." I said, "Dude, I wouldn't have hung out with you for more than, the ceremonial hour. If I didn't have a good time with you too, it's all good." And then he kind of felt bad and was like, "Well, maybe I can audition you for one of the guys in the gang." But the other guys in the gang didn't have enough lines to really even audition for, so I was reading the part of David McCall, but to play one of the other parts. And then after my audition, he had actually gone to the studio and said, "If you don't hire Mark Wahlberg in the lead of this movie, then I'm not going to do the movie." Every day was a blast, working with Reese and Bill Peterson and Amy and everybody. But the funny thing that happened was, I like to improvise, and so when I was screaming at the peephole, he put it in the gag reel, and when everybody saw the gag reel, they really responded to that moment.
You should have allowed nature to take its course. In the end, it will anyway. So let me the fucking house!
But then when Brian Grazer saw the movie, that wasn't in the movie. And Brian goes, "Hey, what happened to that thing at the People? It was like one of my favorite parts." And he goes, "Oh, no, Mark was just joking around." He said, "Well, you got to have that in the movie." And Jamie was a little reluctant, but it's one of the more memorable moments of the film. Oh, with Boogie Nights, it was different because there's been a few movies in my career that are really hard to pitch on the spot, and that was definitely one of them. I wasn't really interested in going into the world of pornography and all that stuff, and because I'd done the Calvin Klein thing, I didn't know anything about Paul Thomas Anderson, so I didn't know why he would want me for this particular movie. I kept hearing about it, and then I finally said, "Okay, I'll read it." I read the first 30 pages, I put it down, I said, "Let me just meet Paul and kind of see where his head's at." I had a meeting with him, hit it off. He said, "All right, I want you to play the part." But again, I don't think he was 100% sure, because he was like, "Let's just have a meeting with some of the other guys." So it was me, John C. Reilly, Philip Seymour Hoffman, God rest his soul, and Thomas Jane. And then, Paul pulled out the scripts, and then we all started reading and improvising and doing that whole thing. And I think that's when he was really comfortable with me having the part. Probably the most difficult to shoot and just... Yeah, painstaking was the scene with Alfred Molina with the firecrackers. I mean, we were just in this room for such a long time, and it was with the firecrackers and the intensity and all that.
I love that song.
The black guy has a gun in his jacket. Todd.
No, all the scenes. I mean, I love the big blow-up scene with me and Bert in the backyard, and all the stuff in the studio with Michael Penn. I mean, there was, great moments and experiences in that one. With Three Kings, I got a call to meet with David O. Russell. The same agent who represented James Gray, who I did The Yards and We Own the Night with, also represented Paul Thomas Anderson, who I did Boogie Nights with, and represented David O. Russell. So it was one of those things where he said, hey, you know, you should really meet David. Loved Flirting with Disaster and Spanking the Monkey. But I was really method back then, so I was still in the whole Yards headspace, and he just kept remembering. You know, he was like, I didn't really... You know, I wanted you for the part, but then I didn't know because you were like this other part, and I didn't know if that's how you were in real life. And so we talked about the part quite a bit, and then he wanted Spike Jonze, who hadn't really acted in a film before in the studio, was giving a little pushback. So we had an opportunity to then kind of work on a lot of the scenes and put Spike and me on tape. And so I think that's where David felt more comfortable hiring me. It was kind of like a bit of a secret audition, even though he was like kind of offering me the part. He wanted to make sure that I wasn't Leo Handler from The Yards, which was a very different character. Spike Jonze was great. I mean, we had a lot of fun. Spike's a gamer. He likes to try things, and obviously fantastic filmmaker in his own right, but wonderful actor as well. Now, with The Perfect Storm, actually, because of Three Kings, I was offered the part. Absolutely loved Wolfgang Petersen, all of his movies, especially Das Boot. And I thought, you know, it was an honor to be able to play a real person, you know, who would kind of go out there and be brave enough to go on a sword boat and, you know, somebody who was from back home, and I knew I had a responsibility to make his family proud. Spent a lot of time living in the crow's nest, hanging with his brother and his mom and the family, and going out on real boats and doing all that stuff. It was an awesome experience. During that movie, I had been introduced to sushi from David O. Russell and Chuck Robin, and they want to have dinner. Normally, I'm pretty picky about where we're going, but I just said okay, and they were picking the place. And then I show up to Matsuhita, and I'm like, what is this, dude? And they're like, oh, it's sushi, don't worry, you'll love it. I'm like, I'm not eating this shit. Then I finally start tasting and trying stuff. Ate everything that came out, absolutely fell in love with it, and then would literally, because there were so many technical glitches with making that movie with the gimbal and the tank and the effects, and that I would have sometimes like days on end where we'd never go in front of camera. We'd just be sitting in our trailer. So I would fly all the way across town back to Matsuhita, like every day. So I just assumed that every sushi place was the same quality. So when we went down to Dana Point to now go shoot out on the water, I went to a sushi place the night before, got like violently ill, and then I still had to go out on the boat the next day. And we were in like 25, 30-foot swells. Literally in between lines, I was puking and almost projectile vomiting on George. It was not a good time. The only reason for making Planet of the Apes was to work with Tim Burton and Dick Zanuck. You know, was never really a huge fan of the original and not really into sci-fi, but I wanted an opportunity to work with Tim, so I just jumped at it. You know, at that stage of my career, I still felt like it would be far more beneficial for me to work with really successful directors, and there would be so much for me to learn and benefit from. Yeah, Tim was absolutely awesome. I think the thing that we both experienced together is let's not have a start date without having a complete script, you know? And with a big movie like that, a tentpole, you know, they have a tendency to say, okay, this movie has to be out by this particular time. And, you know, Tim's an artist, so he doesn't want to be rushed, and he wants to make sure that things are going to be perfect and doesn't want to compromise what he wants to do or how he wants to do it. You know, that was one of the things I learned. But also, I love to hang out with him. I mean, he's such a sweet guy. When we were doing additional shooting in London or we were working in Paris, I was in Paris, and he would come and we were doing ADR and stuff like that, or we'd go out and, you know, we'd go to dinner or go for drinks, and he would sit there just drawing people, and, you know, I was always trying to get my hands on his drawings. I Heart Huckabees was the second film that I'd done with David. You know, it was just awesome working with him. I mean, he was really trying to do something special and unique, and would send me off. He knows that I was a bit method. I would like things to be able to research and prepare, and he would have me listen to Uma Thurman's dad and the Jewel Tree and all these different philosophies about life and everything. And it was, for me, it was an awesome experience. My daughter was born during the filming, and we were just off doing our thing. Had a great time, I think, working with Dustin and Jason and Lily and Isabel and Naomi and Jude. It was a lot of fun. And also, I met Gare on that movie, and Jonah Hill did his first scene when he was at the dinner table.
What happens in the meadow, it does.
Nothing.
Everything.
Everything.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Also, Richard Jenkins, Gene Smart. There were so many amazing people in that movie. It was such a great experience. The Departed was interesting. It was one of those things where I wasn't committed to making the movie, but my agent told Marty that I was. So Marty called me up acting like he was all excited about us making this movie together, and I said, I'm not doing the movie, you know. I wanted a different part, and I wanted some other different things, and we had been talking about doing it for a long time, and then things just happened and the studio pushed back on certain things, and so I said, nah, I don't want to do it. And then Marty was just like silent for a minute, and then I said okay, and I hung up, and then my agent called me back, you know, like 5 minutes later. It was like, what the fuck, just go talk to him. So they sent me a plane on the weekend that I was off in Toronto. Went to Marty's office. I had read the script again, and at this time I was pretty angry. I was like, nah, I'm not doing it. He goes, but look at this part. Look what you get to do with all of these people. And, you know, he knows I'm from that world. And I said, talked to him about improvising and doing my thing. And he said, dude, you're free to do what you want to do. Well, The Fighter was one of those ones where it was like just constantly an uphill battle to get made. The movie, I think, was originally supposed to be made in 2006. There have been a number of directors on the project. Darren Aronofsky was one. Brad Pitt at one point was attached, then Matt Damon, and the movie just kept falling apart. I had already committed to the movie and training and all that stuff. I remember reading the script the first time, and I was like, I just started getting crazy, and I was like, okay, this is the movie. I had wanted to do a boxing movie before with Robert De Niro, where he was going to play Angelo Dundee, and I was playing a fighter from East Boston named Vinnie Curto, and that movie fell apart, and I was determined to kind of like do my boxing movie. So when The Fighter came, I was just like, okay, I just started training and I never stopped, but the movie kept falling apart. Then we would find another director, and finally I just went to the studio and I was like, guys, you gotta let me do this, you know? Pull the movie out, I'll finance it. It was a bit of an uphill battle to get the director that I wanted, but David and I had such a great relationship. Every time we were talking to another director, we were kind of going down the road with somebody else, he'd just call me and we'd just start talking about the movie. And I'd be like, well, I don't think they're gonna go for it, but I'll take this idea and I'll run with it and I'll add it to the script. It just got to the point where it's just sitting, and I remember sitting in my old house in my bathroom, I had this little chaise lounge in there, and we just sit on the phone and talk forever. And then I said, you know what, I gotta make this happen. So I wrote this long letter, and I was going to the head of the studio. I want to talk about all the reasons why I wanted David O to make this movie, and why they should have trust in me to allow me to kind of go with my gut. And finally, you know, I got everybody to agree. And David was able to show everybody what kind of talent he has. It was one of those things. I promised Mickey Ward I was going to get the movie made. Promised Dickie. I promised Alice. And I wanted to show people that Lowell got a really bad rap. Lowell is one of the great industrial towns of America. And just because of the documentary High on Crack Street, it gave Lowell a very bad reputation. You know, Lowell's a great, great, great place. And, you know, it was important for me to get it done. Well, the thing about Ted is very similar to Boogie Nights. It's an extremely difficult movie to pitch. I mean, you know, as soon as somebody says a guy and a teddy bear, you know, buddies that smoke weed, I'm like, no, not happening. And my agent also represented Seth, so I'm thinking, okay, well, he's just jamming me on a movie for another client. But I started hearing from other people at other agencies, and they were like, no, you got to read this thing. It's really cool. So I read it, kind of forget that, you know, you're talking about a teddy bear. It's just like this great buddy comedy. So I met with Seth, really hit it off with him, saw the kind of test of the bear, which looked cool and believable and real, and then went and made the movie. You know, it's the largest, highest grossing R comedy of all time. And it was one of those things where you just had to take a swing, you know, have faith in what we're doing and really commit. You know, my favorite scene in the movie, there's many, but certainly the white trash names, because I thought it was one of those things where here I am having to learn 50 names that really connect to nothing. I just didn't think it would be in the movie. So I said to Seth, I was like, well, what if we kind of do it like we and him always play these games, and I could just spit them off rapid fire.
Nikki, Kelsey, Shauna, Jolene, Earlene, Claudine, Savannah, Casey, Dolly, Kendra, Kylie, Chloe, Devin, Emily, fucking Becky?
Nope.
Wait, was it any one of those names with a Lynn after it?
Yes.
Oh, I got you, motherfucker. I got you. Okay. Brady Lynn, Heather Lynn,
Tammy Lynn.
Fuck!
So it was one of those things that ended up being really cool. I have to talk about the other guys just because it's my first comedy. I wanted to do comedy for a long time. You know, there are comedic elements and performances that I've done, but never done a full-blown comedy. I did the kind of scene with Steve Carell and Tina Fey in Date Night, but that was just a little thing to kind of get my feet wet. I met with a lot of comics, and I was like, I don't know. When I met Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, everything changed. These guys were just so cool, so sweet, so funny. 2 minutes into the dinner, I was like, I'm in. They were like, we haven't even told you the story yet. I said, I don't give a shit. Whatever you want to do, I'll do it with you guys. And they were like, okay, well, can we tell you the story? I was like, sure. And then they told me the story of these two cops, and I was just laughing hysterically. And then literally 3 months later, I get a script. And then another 3 months, we're on the set and we're shooting. And I was a little shy at first, and that I love to improvise, but, you know, I mean, they were encouraging me to get really crazy. So I said, dude, once I get crazy, it's like hard to stop me. And I didn't want to like rub people